let's start off by saying that if you think about change, you have to think about two factors that we have to manage as individuals in order to deal with change. The first of those is that change always involves loss. It doesn't matter if it's a change that you're positively anticipating or a change that you're negatively anticipating. Either way, change involves loss. That's the first part of it, is you have to give it up. You have to recognize that it's over. And if we apply this to retirement, there are lots of things that people have as losses when they retire. Satisfaction of doing a good job, the camaraderie of working with other people, the structure that you have, not to mention the salary. There are all these things that you have that you lose when you retire. And the first thing that you have to do in order to successfully retire is to recognize that those things are losses and to recognize that it's over. I can't go back there. It's done. Now, the next after endings, and these always overlap a bit, is a point at which you're no longer grieving. You're no longer obsessing on those things that are lost, but you really don't know what's coming up in the future either. You're not in either the past or the future world. And then finally, the third step is what is called new beginnings. And now you're at the point at which you're beginning to recognize that you're getting things that make up for the things that you lost. And the other thing that you have to think about when you think about the process of change is that you have to work through it individually, and you cannot expect that everyone is going to work through the process at the same pace. You'll have some people who retire and they're early adapters. And 3 weeks after they're retired, they're perfectly comfortable in the new world. They're very happy, they're very comfortable, and they're going forward. The vast majority of people are wandering in the wilderness for 40 days trying to figure out, what have I lost? What's coming up? How can I accommodate this? And then you have the people who should never have retired in the first place because they just can't even get started on the process. They miss what they had so much that they can't go back. And those are the people for whom the process of accommodating the changes that come with retirement are the most difficult. And if they're fortunate, they will be able to do one of two or three things. One thing is work for their previous employer as a contract. So you get to remain, you're retired, but you still get some of the satisfaction that you had out of doing the job, because maybe once a month, maybe twice a year, you get a chance to go back and do some work. The second one is, and this is what I would advise most people to think about if they're really having trouble giving up their work, is find a place you can volunteer. There are lots and lots, especially in urban areas, there are lots and lots of charitable organizations who would love to have the skill sets of retirees. And you have to take your ego in your hand and go into those places and say, here's what I've done in the past. Is there any way that I can be of help to you? And I think that's another way of making that accommodation. When you leave the workforce, you're taking something with you. And how can you give back and make sure that what you did, what you accomplished over the course of your work life has meaning? And that might be finding proteges that you can coach in retirement. That might be writing a book. There are any number of ways that you can provide a legacy and focus on. Now, it sounds egotistical, and to a certain extent it is. But if you've been in the workplace for 40 years, you've learned something. And I don't care what it is you've done, you've learned something. And you've had a unique set of experiences that enable you to see the world from a perspective that nobody else sees the world, and providing people with that insights into what you've learned over the course of your period of time at work is a way of accommodating the losses that you're going to have when you leave the workplace.
Do you think that going into retirement you need to be selfish?
Oh, for sure. I think you do have to be selfish, and by that what I would mean is you've got to have some things that you want out of retirement. And you and I have had this conversation before, Dan. My belief, my experience is that you have to have something to retire to, as well as something to retire from. And I've always considered myself somewhat lucky, because during my entire work life, work was what I did to enable myself to do the things I wanted to do when I wasn't working. Work for me was not everything. It wasn't the end of the world. And so there were lots of things I wanted to do when I retired and didn't have time to do. And one of the examples is in 1919, the faculty of Harvard put together a set of 50 volumes of what they felt every educated man should have read over the course of his lifetime. Well, my mother gave me those when I was 30 years old, and they sat on my bookshelf unopened for 35 years. And so when I retired, I decided what I was going to do was become Harvard's 1919 educated man and work my way through the books. So I spent an hour a day reading the Harvard 5-foot shelf of books. I had 250 CDs. I found that I listened to probably 10 of them over and over again. And I thought to myself, there must be some reason you bought all of those. So I started at the beginning of the shelf and listened to every piece of music that I had, 1 CD a day, and just listened to it. I didn't listen to it and read, or listen to it and talk, or listen to it and write in my journal. I just listened to the music. And those were things, plus I've always wanted to play golf, and I played golf. So I had things I wanted to do, and I did them, and I had no regrets, and I didn't feel sorry that I did them, because they were things I wanted to do. Now, some people I know, I have friends who spent a summer in Europe when they retired. I have friends who renovated an old house when they retired. I have friends who who took a drive to see how many national parks they could visit in a month. There are lots of things you can do that fill in the space that you had once you lost the structure. So, I mean, there are lots of ways of dealing with this, and you've just got to find your own.
Let's just leave it at that. That's cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.